Let's start with the oceangliest mistakes and slowly work our way down to the absolute stuff of nightmares. The deep sea is basically just a giant, dark, freezing basement where evolution went completely off the rails. Number 7. Number 7, the goblin shark. This is a shark, obviously, but not the cool, majestic Jaws kind of shark. This is the kind of shark that looks like it was drawn by a toddler who just learned about teeth. Living thousands of feet below the surface, the goblin shark is basically a living fossil, which is just a polite way of saying evolution looked at this thing millions of years ago and said, yeah, that's good enough, let's just leave it alone. But here is where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean deeply unsettling. The goblin shark has a protruding snout that looks like a giant, fleshy sword, which it uses to detect electrical fields. Because apparently, just looking like a nightmare wasn't enough, it needed built-in radar. But the real horror show happens when it opens its mouth. Its jaw doesn't just open, it violently shoots out of its face like an alien chest burster to snatch prey. Imagine just minding your own business in the pitch black abyss, and suddenly a flaccid, pinkish gray face launches its entire jaw structure at you from 3 feet away. It's completely unnecessary, incredibly ugly, and frankly, just rude. But at least it keeps to itself in the deep ocean, which is exactly where a face like that belongs. Number 6. The anglerfish. The anglerfish. The poster child for deep sea terror. You have seen the pictures. Giant, needle-like teeth, pitch black skin, and a glowing lure dangling from its head. It looks like a swimming bear trap. But the real nightmare of the anglerfish isn't its appearance, its love life, which I can assure you is significantly worse than yours. When we talk about the terrifying anglerfish, we are almost exclusively talking about the females, because the males, they are essentially tiny, useless, parasitic afterthoughts. A male anglerfish is born with one goal: find a female. And since it's pitch black down there and they have practically no eyes, he just swims around desperately biting onto anything that smells vaguely like a girl. And when he finally bites into a female, his mouth literally fuses to her skin. Their blood vessels connect, his organs slowly melt away, and he is reduced to nothing more than a pair of attached testicles, completely dependent on her bloodstream for survival. It's the ultimate sugar baby relationship, except instead of paying for dinner, he pays with his entire physical form. And just to make things more awkward, a single female can have up to 6 of these fused, melted males dangling off her body at the same time, which is great for her, but honestly, a massive downgrade for the males. Number 5. The giant isopod. If you've ever looked at a common woodlouse, that little pill bug that rolls into a ball when you poke it, and thought, you know what would make this completely perfect? If it was the size of a dog and lived in the crushing darkness of the ocean. Well, congratulations, humanity, because your wishes are my command. Meet the giant isopod. These are essentially deep-sea cockroaches that can grow up to 2.5 feet long. They are covered in hard, armored plating and have dozens of jointed legs that scuttle across the ocean floor. Now, obviously, I know what you're thinking. They must be apex predators, right? Wrong. They are basically the janitors of the abyss. Giant isopods spend most of their time waiting for something massive, like a whale or a giant squid, to die and sink to the bottom. This is called a whale fall. Once the carcass hits the floor, hundreds of these giant roaches swarm it, tearing into the rotting blubber and gorging themselves until they can barely move. And if you think that's gross, just wait. Giant isopods have a biological cheat code. They can survive without eating for up to 5 years. 5 years. Imagine the absolute boredom of sitting in the dark, freezing ocean for half a decade just waiting for a dead whale to drop. But when the food finally arrives, they eat so much that they sometimes literally burst, which is a fantastic way to end a 5-year fast. Number 4. The bobbit worm. Let's take a brief break from the open water and look at the ocean floor, because apparently just swimming in the dark wasn't dangerous enough. The mud itself wants to kill you. The bobbit worm is a predatory bristle worm that can grow up to 10 feet long. but you will never see its entire body. Because this absolute unit spends its entire life buried vertically in the sand, with only its two massive, terrifying scissor-like antennae sticking out. It's basically a biological landmine. Fish swim by, completely unaware that the sandy floor beneath them is actually the mouth of a subterranean monster. The moment a fish gets too close, the bobbit worm strikes with unbelievable speed. Its jaws snap shut with so much force that they can literally slice a fish cleanly in half. And if the prey is too big to swallow whole, the worm just drags the bleeding, thrashing half-fish down into its underground burrow to enjoy in private. There was an incident in an aquarium in the UK where fish kept mysteriously disappearing. The staff thought they had a ghost, or maybe a really depressed employee stealing them. Turns out they just had a 6-foot bobbit worm living under the gravel, quietly snapping everything in half for 2 years, which honestly is just peak job performance. Number 3. The barley fish. Now we are moving away from the monsters that want to eat you and into the realm of pure, unfiltered existential dread. The barley fish is a small, unassuming deep-sea creature. But if you look at its face, you will immediately realize that something is horribly, fundamentally wrong, because it doesn't really have a face. It has a completely transparent, fluid-filled dome covering its entire head, and inside that dome are its eyes, which are not facing forward. They are two glowing, green, tubular orbs that point straight up. Why? Because it spends its life staring at the silhouettes of prey swimming above it against the faint sunlight filtering down from the surface. The transparent shield protects its eyes from the stinging tentacles of jellyfish, which it casually steals food from. But here is the terrifying part. The fish cannot move its eyes. They are permanently locked in the upward position. So if it wants to look forward to see where it's swimming, it has to tilt its entire body vertically, like a rocket launching into space. Imagine just existing in the pitch black, trapped inside your own glass helmet, permanently forced to stare at the ceiling, waiting for a jellyfish to drop a crumb. It's less of an animal and more of a deep-sea surveillance camera that hates its job. Number 2. The vampire squid from hell. With a name like that, you are probably expecting a blood-sucking apex predator that drains the life out of its victims in the dead of night. Well, you're going to be deeply disappointed. The vampire squid, scientifically known as Vampiroteuthis infernalis, which literally translates to vampire squid from hell, is the biggest false advertising in the history of marine biology. It does drink blood. It does have tentacles with suckers. And it definitely doesn't hunt. Instead, it has 8 webbed arms connected by a dark, velvety cape that makes it look like Dracula flying through the ocean. And what does Dracula do with this magnificent cape? He collects garbage. The vampire squid is a detritivore. It floats through the oxygen minimum zone, an area of the ocean so devoid of oxygen that almost nothing else can survive, and uses 2 long, retractable filaments to catch marine snow. Marine snow is exactly what it sounds like. A constant, gentle shower of dead plankton, fecal matter, and decaying body parts falling from the upper ocean. So, while the name implies a gothic nightmare, the reality is a squishy, red-eyed garbage disposal that eats poop and dead skin in a zone where even bacteria struggle to breathe. Which honestly makes the name vampire squid a massive overcompensation. Number 1. The black swallower. And finally, we reach the absolute worst offender on the list. A creature so fundamentally broken by greed and stupidity that it barely qualifies as an animal. The black swallower is a deep-sea fish that looks like a very angry, very stretched out eel. It's relatively small, usually only about a foot long, but it holds the undisputed world record for the most catastrophic case of eyes being bigger than its stomach. You see, the black swallower has a hinged jaw and a stomach that can expand to 10 times its normal size. This allows it to swallow prey that is significantly larger and heavier than itself, which sounds like a great evolutionary advantage until you realize the black swallower has absolutely zero impulse control. It will routinely attack and swallow fish that are up to 10 times its own mass and twice its length. But here is the terrifying, hilarious catch. The black swallower's stomach does produce the enzymes necessary to digest something that massive. So, after it swallows a giant fish whole, the prey just sits inside its stomach, slowly rotting and producing massive amounts of decomposition gases. The swallower's stomach inflates like a balloon, causing the fish to become completely buoyant. It loses all control, floats helplessly up to the ocean surface, and washes up on a beach, dead with a half-rotted fish sticking out of its mouth. Every single recorded instance of a human finding a black swallower has been because it literally ate itself to death, floated to the top, and died of sheer, unadulterated gluttony. Which is honestly the most relatable deep-sea tragedy I've ever heard. Look, I know I've made a lot of sarcastic jokes about these horrifying mistakes of nature, but in all honesty, do you know what I truly find beautiful? The fact that we can just stay on dry land and watch them on a screen. Let me know which of these deep-sea nightmares you'd least like to bump into in the dark, or if I missed your favorite bottom-feeding garbage collector down in the comments. And as always, stay out of the water.